Good afternoon, everyone. Please welcome to the stage Dominic Whitehead, Senior Vice President of Campaigns and Mobilization for NAACP.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We can do better than that. It is 2024. We are less than 80 days away from an election. Good afternoon, everyone. Is NAACP in the house? Is NAACP in the house? Are we fired up? Are we all in? Awesome, awesome. Again, my name is Dominic Whitehead, Senior Vice President of Campaigns and Mobilization. And first and foremost, we want to thank all of you for coming out today. I bring greetings on behalf of our President and CEO, Derek Johnson, our Chairman of our National Board of Directors, Mr. Leon Russell. I believe we have Mr. Michael Turner in the room. I'm Chair of our Convention Planning Committee. I believe I saw him in the room as well. Ask Mr. Turner to stand. And so many other leaders here at the NAACP, our state conference president, Mr. Theotis Pace here for the Illinois State Conference, President Pace. And he will be coming up to bring greetings shortly. But before we start this afternoon, we know that we are less than 80 days away from a very, very important election cycle. Now, we know NAACP is nonpartisan, correct? NAACP is nonpartisan, correct? But we are not blind. Sometimes we say we are very political, and we're political as hell. And so we know what is at stake this election cycle. And so as we think about black voters, as we think about democracy, as we think about what is at stake this election cycle, we know that black voters would carry this country and move this country forward. We're turning out black voters across the country. We know that our members across the country, and we're going to talk about Illinois today, is doing the work day in and day out. We're looking to mobilize about 14.5 million black voters this election cycle across the country in some very key, crucial battleground states. Now, we've heard it before, over and over again, but this is the most important election of our lifetime. And I said it a second ago that NAACP is nonpartisan, but we're not blind. There are two candidates on the ballot. I don't think I have to say any names whatsoever. What I will say is one candidate stands for one thing and another candidate stands for moving this country forward, right? And we know as NAACP, as our allies and our partners in this room, we want to move this country forward. So today in this session, we're going to talk about how black voters and our partners and allies from labor, our partners and allies from the LGBTQIA+ community, our partners and allies from the reproductive and the women's community in coalition and in partnership with us today to talk about how we're moving this country forward. There's a thing called Project 2025, and we're not scared of that because we know what we're going to do to make sure Project 2025 is not a reality. Is that right? Awesome, awesome. So with that being said, with no further ado, I'll bring up Mr. Theotis Pace, our state conference president for the great state of Illinois here, who has welcomed us. I know we're here for the DNC, but we want to make sure we honor and recognize the leadership here of NAACP in the great state of Illinois. President Pace.
Fired up! And we're ready to go. Good afternoon. My name is Theotis Pace, and I'm the president of the Illinois State Conference and the Kankakee County branch of the NAACP. Will the Illinois delegation please stand and remain standing? We have all our presidents from across the state, our executive committee members, and all our state leadership. Thank you. Please remain standing, please. It is with great honor that we welcome you to the All-In Black Voters Democracy Forum. Today, we gather not only to discuss the challenges and the opportunities before us, but also to reconfirm our commitment to the democratic principles that shape our nation. As we continue to fight for justice, equality, and the protection of our rights, a forum like this plays a critical role in empowering our communities. Civic engagement is at the heart of our work, and we must ensure that our communities are informed, inspired, and involved to participate in the democratic process. The Illinois State Conference of the NAACP stands with you with this journey, especially as we look ahead for the 117th NAACP National Convention held in Chi-Town, the Windy City, Chicago, Illinois, July 2026. Together, we will work to ensure that every voice is heard and every vote is counted. Thank you for being here, and let us continue to move together. We are all in, because guess what? We're not going back. Thank you.
Let's give it up for President Pace one more time and the Illinois delegation. Now, before this program gets started, we know folks have been asking about these shirts. Our black job is voting. I think our president and CEO last night made it very clear on the stage that his job is black and he is doing his black job. And so I will direct your attention to the screens. I know many folks have been asking about these shirts. If you use this QR code, you can purchase these shirts in real time. And then also you can go to NAACPstore.org, and we have so many shirts around the work that we're doing across the country that matches our advocacy work. With that, I'm going to step out of the way so we can get this panel started. Are we ready to go? Are we ready to go? Awesome, awesome. So I will kick it back over to our voice of God to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Dominic, and please welcome to the stage one of the strongest advocates and champions in the United States Congress, Representative Jasmine Crockett, representing the 30th District of Texas.
Can y'all hear me? You can always find a source. Oh, see, that's the wrong sorority. Can the right sorority stand up, please? There we go. There we go. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Listen, I'm not gonna hold you. As you can hear, my voice is struggling a little bit. But I'm so thankful to be here specifically at the NAACP. You know, as someone who allegedly is the younger generation, a newer voice, I don't know how I'm younger. I guess I'm just young for congressional years or something, because I am definitely not young. Lots of amazing young people sitting like right kind of in this area. But I appreciate this space because I think that it's important that we always honor legacies and legacy organizations. And that's what NAACP is. There would not be a Jasmine Crockett but for those that decided that they didn't even know that a me could exist. But they knew that it was important to stand up and make sure that every voice counted and that real representation actually was a part of the equation. And so right now we are really at a precipice, and while you know, NAACP is nonpartisan, I just need y'all to know I am not, but I'm not gonna be disrespectful, but y'all all know who I am and where I stand. I will say that I want you to be bold in your conversations around Project 2025, because as far as I'm concerned, Project 2025 is a very partisan thing. I mean, it's supposedly for the next conservative administration, and we know that over 30 of the authors either worked in Trump's administration or they worked on his campaign. They mentioned Trump in Project 2025 over 300 times, but somehow the Heritage Foundation maintains its 501c3 status, and so if they gonna play this game, we gonna play it too. So again, I want you to be bold in your conversations around Project 2025, but let's not get it twisted. There's nothing in Project 2025 that Democrats have anything to do with. That's just what it is. Now, I know most of you probably are working real hard every single day, trying to make sure you can keep a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes on the backs of your children. And so most of you don't have the extra time to read an extra 1,000 pages. But let me tell you a little bit of the highlights, the things that we care about. Number one, if I had to characterize overall what this book is, or what I call a manifesto, I would say that it's this radical, racist, revenge love letter that they have written, where they are longing for, quote unquote, an America of days past. They are glorifying Jim Crow, and they are trying to bring it back and bring it back stronger than ever. And so some of the things that they want to do is get rid of our civil rights protections. This is a civil rights organization. So y'all should stand strong on business when it comes down to saying we reject Project 2025 and any candidate that supports it. So when we talk about civil rights, a lot of people think of marching in the streets. We think of things such as police brutality. We think of equity. But really, what does it mean? So much of this is really insidious, and it's really about taking us back to even before Jim Crow, as far as I'm concerned, because they're really trying to hit us economically. Right now, we're just getting to the point that we can somehow ascend. In this particular administration, the wealth gap has actually been shrinking. Now, I know it ain't enough, but it's actually been shrinking. And instead of it shrinking more, they want to widen it more. So when I talk about this, and while they won't mention a lot about economics specifically, they want to do things such as make sure that there are going to be loyalists that are working in whatever administration. Instead of pledging your oath to the people, pledging your oath to the Constitution, you will somehow have to bend the knee to whomever is the executor. That is what they want to do. And so as I've traveled the world, we don't usually talk about it, but it is a big part of what we do as members of Congress. Usually when we land in another country, we have career public servants that are there to give us the lay of the land, and they tell us everything. Now you imagine taking those people and taking everything that they have to give to this country and replacing it with somebody who just said, well, you know what, you mine, you my people's, and so I'm down. My mom is sitting up front, and she always gets embarrassed. She right here, wave your hand, mama. Okay. Listen, my mom raised me working a federal job. She still works for the federal government. And no, seriously, and the idea that somebody would tell her that she's not qualified for her job or she needs to leave her job unless, but that is what they want to do. We've got some amazing women that are sitting up front, and so I'm going to make sure I take my seat in a second because y'all are going to hear from some amazing powerhouses. Raise y'all hand because y'all know who I'm talking about. Yeah, see, Alexis is like, it's me. No. Listen, y'all will hear from them. But from Planned Parenthood to HRC, we're talking about this document that says, you know what? We know that the Dobbs decision got rid of Roe, but you know what? We want to go one step further. Did anyone follow the mifepristone case? Right. And I know they came to the right conclusion, but definitely for the wrong reasons. Here's the deal. They say, we don't even want you to have access to birth control. That is what they're trying to do. I have never seen anything else that was literally written out that looks more like slavery than this particular document. To tell somebody that, no, we don't want you to have any authority whatsoever over your body, that is what slavery was. So that is what it does. They want to do things such as say, you know, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, what's that about? We don't want to support that. They want to do things such as tell us that our history, have y'all heard of CRT? Let me just break it down and then I'm out. I've been arguing that Project 2025 is already here. Because first of all, we don't have Roe, and I'm very familiar with Roe because Roe is actually a Dallas case. It came out of my district. Henry Wade was the district attorney in Dallas County that was prosecuting women. That is where that case came out of. And that case allegedly was based upon our constitutional protection to the right to privacy. One of the things that Project 2025 basically says is that, listen, forget the Constitution. We don't want no parts of that. Well, if you don't have a Constitution, then I know you don't have a democracy, not in this country. And so when we see opinions such as the immunity decision that came out from this court, when we look at the Chevron decision says, you know what? All of y'all that were concerned about Flint, Michigan, and them little children, them little black folk being poisoned, listen, we don't want y'all to have an agency that has expertise and will do things to protect all communities. Instead, we want to just make sure that the justices are the ones that get the final say-so. Let me tell you, Project 2025 is here. What they are trying to do now, and I know this personally because I served in the Texas State House. And the Heritage Foundation was doing things such as giving us the CRT bill, which was never about CRT, it was about deleting our history. And if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to what? Repeat it. And so they gave us that. They also gave us the heartbeat bill, which was the 6-week abortion ban. They gave it to Texas, they gave it to Florida. The same voter suppression laws, they gave them to Texas, Florida, Georgia. I'm telling you, the Heritage Foundation has been doing this, and they've been hiding under the guise of it's a 501c3. So you don't have any limits on how much can be donated. You don't have any disclosure responsibilities so that you can know who is putting money in. They are playing in our faces. So for anybody that's out here saying, oh, well, it ain't gonna be that bad, or no, it can't, yes, it can. It can get worse. It will get worse. You will hear from Kelly, who's gonna tell you about the ridiculous attacks on the LGBTQIA community, and I'm putting her on the spot because I'm gonna expect her to break it down to you and tell y'all exactly how many bills we had going through the state houses. This is not new. This is a real fight, and these women will break it down for you because it's already here, and if we don't wake up, and yes, I said stay woke, then they will, the little rights y'all thought we had, they will be gone in an instant. So I know I should have been bright and cheery. My bad. But they'll bring the fire and give you a little bit more optimism. I'm here to be real. I love y'all, and I appreciate y'all. Let's get it.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Sheena Mead, Chief Executive Officer of the Clean Slate Initiative.
Good afternoon. All in? All in? Well, we're going to talk about if we really got everybody all in today. My name is Dr. Sheena Mead. I am the CEO of the Clean Slate Initiative, a bipartisan organization that is focused on removing barriers for people who have been arrested or have a conviction on their record by automatically sealing their record. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I was excited about coming to talk to the NAACP today because Dominic and Jamal said, we want you to do a TED Talk type style. Well, y'all see my name is not Ted, I'm Sheena. So y'all about to get a Sheena Talk today. And just like the Congresswoman said, all I know how to do is just keep it real. And this looks like a very friendly room and a room that I could be real with. And there's some things I want to share. And I was struggling about, like, what am I going to say? Because I'm just preaching to the choir. These are the people that I have grew up with. This is labor what I have been a part of. I don't want to just preach to the choir. They know that we're a country that over-criminalized. They know we're a country that has mass incarceration. So what can I say? But we also know a choir sometimes get off tune. Sometimes the sopranos and the tenors and the altos are not singing on the right tune. So today I'm coming to talk to the choir to make sure that we all sing the right tune because I have been here over the last couple of days and realized that we need some tuning in our talk, in our song. So what I want to talk to y'all is about, I was struggling, like I don't want to just share my story because they know short stories of people being directly impacted, but I am. Before I became the CEO of Clean Slate, before I got to work with labor, AFSCME and the AFL-CIO and organizing with Black Youth Vote, I was a young mom. I was actually a teenage mom 3 times over before I was 19, and then I found myself in my early 20s a mom of 4. And I was struggling. I live in the state of Florida, and we just had 2 back-to-back hurricanes, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. And back then, I don't know if y'all remember, we didn't have Apple Pay and Cash App or Zelle. We had checks. And I know I got a few people of faith in here, so y'all might have that same type of faith I had, that if I write the check on Thursday, amen, hello, oh, I got some, they too bougie over here. You got, okay. If I wrote the check on Thursday, That Walmart wouldn't deposit it until Saturday, and my direct deposit get there on Friday. Okay. So that's the type of faith I was operating on, but also had a little bit of financial literacy that I was dealing with. And I wrote a check to feed my babies. I went to Walmart and I wrote the check, and I wrote the check a little bit over, because y'all remember we used to get cash back. I just need a little something for the gas to put in my car, because if y'all was that type of broke, if you ever experienced that type of broke, either you had car insurance but you had no gas, or when the car was working you had no insurance. Well, this day I had no gas, so I needed to make sure I could get my children to daycare, and so I wrote the check over, and the check came up to $87.26. Y'all remember that number? $87.26. 2 months go by now. Let me just tell you, y'all, that check bounced. Now, I'm going to take accountability. They probably called me. I don't know. I don't think they did. And then the check got returned. But 2 months later, as I'm getting my 4 kids are running around the house, I hear a knock at the door. Mommy, it's the police. I said, well, who they looking for? Because they ain't looking for me. So I answered the door. Sheena, we have a warrant for your arrest for a worthless check. That day, for $87.26. Because the district attorney decided to prosecute that case for a worthless check for under $150. And I went to jail. You know, I was like, you know what, I'm going to charge the game. I should have paid these people their money. I went to jail. I had a $500 bill for an $87.26 check. And I came back home and I said, you know what, let me just pay them the check, the fees. I had to go to court, had to borrow money because, you know, I was already broke. Had to borrow money to pay everything back. And I thought this was over. But I realized that my true sentence had just begun. Because now I could not get a job where I wanted a job. I could not live where I wanted to live because it's legal to discriminate against people with arrests or convictions. And I even found issues trying to get my degree. Because most of these employers, landlords, and education run background checks on people. And this is not just unique. This is just not a Sheena thing. 1 in 3 people, so I want y'all to just take a moment and look around the room. Because a lot of people amening and leaning in, they one of the 1 in 3. 1 in 3 Americans have an arrest or conviction on their record. 70 to 100 million people in America have an arrest or conviction. And just wait for it, I'm gonna get to it. 20 million people in this country have a felony conviction. You will get to the song tuning in a minute, 1 second. So when I talk about, you know, these issues, it is very bureaucratic to get your record sealed or expunged. People want to move forward. People want to have a second chance. And right now, just about every state has a law to get your record cleared. But it's very cumbersome. There's a lot of red tape. In states like Louisiana, you got to pay $500 just about per offense just to get your record cleared. In Missouri, you could be eligible, but the judge could have discretion to say, I don't deem you eligible. We have DAs that are telling you you're not eligible. And so what I'm so proud of is that at the Clean Slate Initiative, we have worked to pass legislation in 12 states to allow people to get their record automatically cleared, that the burden is no longer on them. So that means once they have remained crime-free, done their time, that their record is automatically cleared. And that has impact over 15, I'm gonna say it louder, 15 million people now have a pathway to get their record clean. And we're not gonna stop until we get millions or more people that opportunity. But what I want to go back to the song and tune, like as proud as I am of the work that we have been doing across the country, legislation alone and policy alone cannot change hearts and minds. It is what we say. It is the narrative that we lead with. And when we know better, we what? When we know better, we do what? And so my call to action for y'all, and I'm gonna just leave with 2 more stories, is that we do better when we think about the narrative that we are leading. Now I know you have heard about the man who has got felony convictions, and let me just say something. That may be a badge of honor for him. But for millions of people in this country, They are facing hardship. They want to get a job. They want to be all in. They want to move forward. And when we use dehumanizing language, it does not help. So the next story I'm gonna just point you to is there is a man, and he a man, ladies. He's a man. His name is Desmond Meade. He is my husband. But before he was my husband, he was someone who had a drug addiction that he got when he was serving in the military. He came home and dealt with homelessness, incarceration. But he got his life together and he went on to go get his degree. He went on to get a law degree, but he had a vision. Your hand clap. That's Dr. Desmond Meade. But I ain't get to the round of applause moment yet. I'm about to get there. But the thing was, Desmond had a vision because Desmond could not vote in the state of Florida because he had a felony conviction, because it was a Jim Crow law that was in our Constitution that did not allow people to vote. And we know this Constitution law came from out of the Jim Crow era to prevent who from voting? Come on, y'all. He had a vision that he could vote one day, and when I ran for office in 2016, he could not even cast a vote for me. But he had a vision that he said that I believe that the 1.4 million people in the state of Florida will be able to vote. And we passed a ballot initiative that allowed 1.4 million people in 2018 with felony convictions the ability to vote, which was the largest expansion of voter rights since the women's suffrage movement. Who is welcoming those people back to the polls? Who is letting those people know that we are welcoming you and you are all in? Right. So what I'm saying is when we think about the language that we're using, there are people watching. The NAACP has been at the forefront with me in the voting rights fight. And what I'm just want to let y'all know is this, don't let us have a moment in time that we get stuck up in a trend, in a narrative that are making people feel like they're not all in, and feeling like they got to go the other way because people are using it as a badge of honor. Do you understand what I'm saying in my C3 voice? So I would just say this. There's another man. His name is Tim Walz. He signed legislation. He signed clean slate legislation into law, I believe it was last year. But Tim Walz is actually one of the 3 Americans that has an arrest or conviction on his record. And so when you, yes, in 1995, he had a DUI. We don't let that one moment define who we are in this moment. So I just want us to be thoughtful about when we're out here organizing, when we're knocking on doors, there may be somebody that you're gonna roll up on that has a conviction, that has an arrest. And we're gonna let them know that we all in, that you're all in, that we're welcoming you to the polls. I'm getting Oscar music. Okay, I'll take it. So are we all in? Are we all in? Y'all gonna let those sisters and brothers know what? You all in? I want y'all to look at cleanslateinitiative.org if y'all want any more information. We're coming to a state near you. We're in Illinois right now. We're trying to pass a bill. Reach out to your members, and also on the federal level, there is not any clean slate legislation, and it will be the first legislation that will allow people to be able to get their record clear, because right now you have to go through the president to get him pardoned. I thank y'all for your time. I look forward to working with y'all.
We are now going to transition to our Black Voters Democracy Forum. Please join me in welcoming the following panelists to the stage, and please approach the stage and take your seats as I call your name. First, we have Alexis McGill Johnson, President and Chief Executive Officer of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Please welcome Kelly Robinson, President of the Human Rights Campaign. Please welcome Lee Saunders, President of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And as we all know, our leaders are being pulled in different directions and have different engagements. We will be joined shortly by Siobhan Arline Bradley, President and CEO of NCNW. This forum will be moderated by Garrison Hayes, award-winning filmmaker, journalist, and entrepreneur.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I'm ready for this conversation with these brilliant panelists. We're talking today about Project 2025, a 920-page manifesto authored by the Heritage Foundation. And so for the last many years, we've seen the rise of extreme and toxic rhetoric flooding into our political ecosystem. And what we know is that that toxic rhetoric has consistently turned into toxic policy. But it hasn't always been easy to connect that rhetoric and that policy in a way that resonates for voters. And so we're talking about Project 2025. If you were to ask voters back in June, less than 30% of Americans said that they knew about Project 2025. And today, a month later, 54% said that they knew what it was, and 45% believe that it is tied directly and describes the other guy's agenda for this country. So we're going to be dissecting and discussing that today, and I'm excited to be joined by these panelists, so let's dig right in. And we're talking about it as it specifically relates to Black people. So we're just going to jump right on in. Education is critical, and Project 2025 seeks to defund public education in favor of private and charter schools and many, many others. So I want to start there. How does Project 2025 undermine educational opportunities and exacerbate racial disparities for Black students specifically? President Robinson, let's start with you.
Oh, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, thank you for hosting this important conversation. And I also feel like I should thank Taraji P. Henson, because I feel like when she talked about it on the BET stage, it really started to open up the dialogue and discussion by bringing it into the popular culture and zeitgeist of our country in powerful ways. Once again, Black people leading the culture and also raising the threat and alarm. For me, I think that there's such an interconnectivity to every part of Project 2025. And for anyone that thinks this is just a dream from our opposition, it is not. So many of the policies in Project 2025 are actually being beta tested in places like Texas and Florida right now. When you think about the Don't Say Gay or Trans bills that are playing out in Texas and Florida, that's the beta testing of Project 2025. When you think about the book bans that are playing out in those states, that's exactly what they want to nationalize. We're talking about them erasing our stories and our histories from the textbooks and then trying to criminalize even discussions of some of our families in the classrooms. And when I talk about the interconnectivity, it really goes deep. There's a story I want to share from Louisiana. Because of one of the Don't Say Gay or Trans bills that passed in the state of Louisiana, there was a family that had to move out of the state. And if y'all aren't familiar with these bills, basically it's saying that a teacher could be punished or fired for affirming a child's identity as LGBTQ or their family that is an LGBTQ plus family. So in this particular family in Louisiana, one of the dads was one of two pediatric children's heart surgeons in the state of Louisiana. Because that Don't Say Gay or Trans bill passed, he was afraid that if his daughter, when going to school, talked about having two dads, that it was possible that the Department of Child and Family Services could come knocking at their door to take away their child, to break up their family. So him and his husband ended up moving out of the state of Louisiana, and that was devastating for them and their family who had lived in Louisiana for decades, but it was also devastating for the community. When he left, there were no children's heart surgeons left in New Orleans. There was only one children's heart surgeon left in the state of Louisiana. So when we think about these laws and their impact and intersectionality, when you attack one of our families, you are actually attacking the fabric of all of our communities. That's the danger that Project 2025 represents, and how it's not just a vision that they have to implement next year should they gain power at the federal level. It's something that we're seeing playing out in states across the country right now.
President Johnson, maybe you can add here, defunding public education. Any thoughts on how that will impact Black communities specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, how confident do you have to be in your power to lay out a 900-page document saying everything you're about to do? You're not trying to hide it behind the scenes. You're not trying to say, I didn't see it coming. No one could say they didn't see it coming. You are willing to publish an almost 1,000-page manifesto, as Congresswoman Crockett said, about your intention to gut communities, to transfer wealth to every community but ours, to play literally for power in for the next generation. They have spent, the people behind Project 25, the people who fund Project 25, have spent the last several decades amassing a level of structural power on the state level. We don't get to a Dobbs decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. We don't get to a gutting the Voting Rights Act. We don't get to the LGBTQ gender-affirming challenges. We don't get to fighting in states against the right to work without having amassed some level of political power, even when it's not popular with what's happening in the states. And so I start there. I'll come back to education. I start there because I think we have to understand how confident they are in their playbook if, in fact, they get the kind of amass the rest of political power that they are fighting for this year in a very, again, not political way, just stating the facts. Part of the strategy is to defund agencies, public agencies that our communities have relied on consistently, whether that is access to information, whether that is access to public health care. I think Planned Parenthood is a critical part of the public health infrastructure. So defunding education, defunding Planned Parenthood and other health care support through Title X, defunding, literally defunding our community safety programs, everything that we rely on to keep our communities safe and healthy, everything we rely on to transfer information to the next generation. They want to remove us from that so that we are operating in a wilderness, that incoherence that by the next generation, they will have brought us back, right? Just connecting the dots back to, I don't know what else to call it, but slavery, as Representative Crockett named it. They want to take us back in that way by taking away the things that we have leveraged in order to make any kind of progress for our community. So it's very systematic. It is focused on institutional shift, right? Because when you control institutions, that's how you control power and leverage. It's not just about people marching; it's about the kinds of institutions and laws they can drive. So that's, I think, the thing that undergirds Project 2025 that is horrifying and terrifying that we have to pay attention to.
President Saunders, we'll come to labor a little bit later on, but I do want to give you an opportunity to speak to the organizing that would need to take place with families to kind of safeguard against these educational cutbacks in their communities. Anything to add to that?
Well, very simply, we've just got to make our voices heard every single day, and we've got to mobilize and organize and educate our communities regarding this real threat that exists. We aren't making this stuff up. 900 pages which will attack our communities across the country. Now, let me just tell you a little story and how it impacts on working families, and especially Black families. Project 2025. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. My dad was a proud bus driver, and he was a member of the Amalgamated Transit Union. My mother was a community activist, and she fought for justice, and she fought for having a seat at the table. What Project 2025 does completely is take that seat that we have at the table currently away from us. Make no mistake about it. Now, I'm the president of one of the largest unions in this country, 1.4 million members who are public service employees, public service. And I'm proud that I am the president of this great union because we provide essential services, public services, to the citizens of this country, whether it's sanitation, whether it's child care, home care, nursing, health care, employment services, in the public service, you name it, we got it. And what this would do in the public sector, Project 2025, and it's written in black and white. They don't believe that public sector unions and public sector workers should have a seat at the table. And they are very clear in what they say in Project 2025. They want to eliminate public service unions. Eliminate. So we don't have the ability to organize. Public service workers don't have the ability to have that seat at the table to talk about improving wages and benefits and working conditions, pensions, safety and health issues. They want to take us out of the ballgame completely. You know who that impacts? In the public sector employs, to a greater extent, more than in the private sector, percentage-wise, black families. I can look around this room and I can ask you, are you working in the public service, or do you know someone, or you have a family member who works in the public service? And I would expect everyone in this room would raise their hand. And in most cases, public service workers, 35% are represented by unions. So they have a seat at the table. They want to take away that seat. They want to take away that seat so you have no power, so you have no voice. And we've got to treat this as a real threat. They are serious about doing this. Make no mistake about it. And so that's why it's so important that we understand this document. We understand what they are trying to do. Another area that I'd like to mention very quickly, because black families depend upon the service so many years. Head Start. Mm-hmm. Head Start. They want to blow it away. That has an impact on our kids who rely on the Head Start program, but it also has an impact on the workers who we represent who provide Head Start across the country. They want to get rid of it. These are just examples of what is in this document, and it can become reality if we don't make our voices heard and fight back.
Yeah. So much of what you're describing connects directly to the economy. And when you poll young people, the thing that they're most concerned about is our economy. Why don't you welcome to the stage President Arline Bradley, everyone? Oh, Siobhan Arline Bradley. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. We're talking about the economy and how Project 2025 poses a very specific threat to economic growth and economic equity. I want to put this question to anyone who wants to answer it first. How could Project 2025 exacerbate inequalities and inequities in our country? Whoever wants to take that first.
You ask me? Is it me?
Go, yeah, go for it.
Me? Well, very simply, I believe strongly that unions are the vehicle to improve the economic lives of black families and all families across this country. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. And we do that through the process of having that seat at the table to negotiate fair wages, good benefits, strong working conditions, protect our members and workers through health and safety measures. We do all of that. That creates power for us. It creates a quality of life for us. And it's just not union members, because what happens when we are able to negotiate those standards, workers not in unions sometimes get those standards, okay? Which is a good thing, which is a good thing. If we don't have the ability to do that, just think about what will happen. I mean, think about what will happen. You will be at the mercy of the employer who may not want to consider helping you at all, the employer who may not want to develop health and safety provisions within that contract, the employer who will say, well, you don't deserve a raise this year, so you aren't getting it. You don't deserve additional benefits or improved benefits. You aren't getting it. You have nobody to speak for you. And let me tell you something. I know how this game works. You will be taken and we will be taken advantage of. We've seen it so many times in the history of our country where people will be taken advantage of if they do not have a voice on the job. And this document takes that voice away.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Hey, everybody. Good to see y'all. We are doing a crazy run here. I want to say this about black women in terms of economic parity. Project 2025 also seeks to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion. And DEI as a core source of opportunities for women have really fallen on the backs of black women, being the sacrificial lamb of the DEI attacks. So if you look at the workforce of DEI, black women have begun to lose their jobs. Over the last 7 to 8 months, we've seen literally a massive dip. Over 40% of those so-called imaginary folks that they've started to make up because of 2020, and I'm saying imaginary for a lot of corporations because they decided to blink and now it's gone. This Project 2025 intentional plan has knocked out DEI in a way that will harm black women specifically. If you also look at equal pay for black women, I've been touting this all weekend long. Equal pay for black women for us is a priority at NCNW specifically because 66 cents on every $1 of a white male shows a 34 cents gap for earning for black women every single day. And that's not just black women, all women. Women collectively only make 82 cents on every one male dollar. So if we're looking at Project 2025, it is designed to remove an entire commitment to diversifying industry. And when you remove diversity opportunities in industry, you remove actionable opportunities for people of color specifically. The last thing I will say is, as someone who is a mother, I'm looking at the economic effects of black moms in this moment. For those that are raising children, when you think about those that are literally living from paycheck to paycheck, this actual plan not only dismantles DEI, but it also dismantles spaces in education. And I do not want to disconnect economics, education, and healthcare. We're going to talk about all three, but they are all connected. We call them social determinants very intentionally, because if you don't have healthcare, then you're not well enough to work. If you're not well enough to work, you're not well enough to get paid. You're not well enough to get paid, you have nothing. And that is where we're seeing a lot of the challenges in our community.
I want to stay here because we're describing the problem very well, right? Like the problem, Project 2025, that's the problem. But let's talk a little bit about solutions. Yeah. What would you recommend? What are some things that we can put forward, proposals to counteract the potential of a Project 2025, especially since, as Representative Crockett said, some of these things are already operating in the world? What can we put forward as a counteraction? We'll start here with you, Siobhan, if you have anything.
Sure. So I think for and not just economics, but just in general, counterattacks are, for us, is one, political strategy. Part of our disconnect with Project 2025 is that we saw a decrease in voter turnout in 2016, but this started even before 2016. This has been a concerted effort for decades. So if we can have an answer with political parity on every government level, from school board all the way to the White House, we should be looking at individuals that are like-minded, that are engaging with our values in every political seat there is. That means we need teachers to run for office. We need doctors to run for office. You know, we need moms to run for office. We need dads to run for, we need grandparents, right? We need to have representation on the ground. I think the other thing is, quite frankly, and I've had the ability to kind of lay in some corporate spaces most recently, is I've learned that representation is not enough. Representation is not power. And that's where I think we have a disconnect. that if I check a box, then I did my job. No, if we don't forget the seat at the table, take the table. And then they'll just go take it. And then begin to create generational leadership in those spaces. Tactically, that looks like getting younger folks in the electorate that understand civics in kindergarten, in first grade, in third grade, in fifth grade, and building out a quite frankly, a movement of people across generations to be able to have not only political power, but also have lasting corporate and economic power.
President Johnson, it's not lost on me that you're the president of an action fund. That's taking that power.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on building power and preventing these things from taking over our lives?
Look, politics and power on the other side is what has gotten us into this mess. And so politics and power is actually what is going to take us out, right? To get us out and get us free. And so I think my sister Siobhan is absolutely right here that, and again, naming the problem, being really clear about the problem. Our opposition has spent, I would say, in reproductive rights, maybe the last 50 years, building and cementing power, building a structural advantage that makes it incredibly challenging for us to challenge, to get the representation, to get into those seats, because they've gerrymandered many of us out of power. So it is so important because when we have those systems and structures, that's actually, to Kelly's point, where they have created the laboratories to test not just the path to overturn Roe, but we back in prior to the Dobbs decision, there was a bill called SB 8 in Texas that put a bounty on people who were traveling out of state or getting access, trying to get access to abortion in state when it was still legal. They put a bounty on people who were aiding, abetting, supporting people getting out of state. That was SB 8. But SB 1 was a Voting Rights Act bill. And SB 2 to 7 were also ones in which they were trying to think about how to dismantle power because they had locked that power in. So I think it's really important for us to understand the analysis of where that structural advantage is coming from. The only way out of that then is to build transformative power, right? Our transformative power has to do with the folks who have not been engaged in the process. Yeah. Our upside, the folks who who legitimately have decided that the work that they the political process has not worked for them, right? In a real way, they don't feel like the political process has worked for them, and so they don't engage in it, and they make a reasonable choice in their minds to stay home. Yeah, that's where we have to build more transformative power to help those and connect the dots for those who care about all of the things we've talked about. They care about the education, they care about the economy, they care about getting the jobs, they care about providing for their family, they care about being able to make their own basic healthcare decisions privately without government interference. We need to connect to them, and that's, I think, our job, right, as movement, to connect those dots and help them understand where their engagement and their civic engagement moves their needs forward. Yeah. So building that transformative power, not just this year, not just next year, but literally every single day as a conversation is the only way we are going to start to transform, because they are clear on the other side. They are clear that the play is for the next generation. Yeah. They are clear that they see transforming demographics. They see transforming progress on gender and on race and other all identities. People showing up and being their true, authentic selves, and they are afraid of what that belonging means. And so they are trying to control through controlling these levers of power. But we have so much power that is left on the table, not just taking the table. We have so much power that is left on the table when we are there, that's the work that I think we have to do. And if we don't do that, then shame on us.
I think it's pretty clear that the people behind Project 2025 have positioned themselves as the enemies of the queer community, of the LGBTQ+ community. So can you talk a little bit, Kelly, about the attack on trans people and the attacks that we've seen on the queer community more broadly that is often codified in this proposal?
Yeah, and I want to pick up on this thread that my colleagues here are talking about. This is fundamentally about power. That's what this is about. And I think everything that Alexis said that makes me excited that we're on the verge of having a majority-minority country, the young people are more diverse than ever, including along lines of sexual orientation and gender identity, that we've got all kinds of things happening in the culture that feel like us is amazing to me, but it's scaring the sugar honey iced tea out of somebody else, right? And I had a pastor that once said to me, she goes, the reason that they, and she's talking about older, whiter, you know, some of the MAGA type folks are so afraid of us, people like us in rooms like this, is because they're afraid that once we have power, we're going to treat them as horribly as they've treated us all of these centuries. That's what they're afraid of. And that's why they're spending millions of dollars trying to suppress their vote, because they're afraid of our power. That's why they're spending millions of dollars trying to isolate us and take away our rights, because they are afraid of our power. And the response to fear cannot be more hate. It's got to be hope.
That's right.
And I think that's what we're trying to generate in rooms like this. Because when I look at the attacks that they're launching on the trans community, there is nothing new that they are doing. The same horrific things they're saying about trans people today, they said about people living with HIV 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. The same horrific things they're saying about trans people today, they said about lesbian, gay, and bi people 40 years ago. The same horrific things they're saying about trans people today, you better believe they said about black women 100 years ago, too. Mm-hmm. Even if you, come on now, even if you look at the policies they're pushing, bathroom bans, aren't those familiar? Trying to kick us out of educational systems, isn't that familiar? Everything that they are trying on trans lives now, they have tried it on black communities too. And I think that what you see with Project 2025 is an experimentation that they're putting out really to the world and to progressive communities of, do you really care about each other or not? Mm-hmm. Because if we allow them to be successful in their attacks on the trans community, who do you think they're going to come for next?
Yeah.
Us. So this is actually, I think, an incredible opportunity for us, because I don't know if our opposition studied Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, right, in intersectionality, but they are sure weaponizing intersectionality, aren't they? They are. And I think it's actually an opportunity for us to realize, as we have in times that have challenged us before, that our fates are intimately intertwined, that none of us is free until all of us are free. And the antithesis to Project 2025 has to be a vision that's not just about what are we going to do to win on November 5th, 2025, but or 2024, excuse me, but how are we going to get to November 21-24? What's the vision that we have for generations to come? And the last thing I'll say here is that I think Project 2025 is not the first time that they've done something like this. I think about the Lewis C. Powell and the Powell memo that came out in the 1970s. This was in response to the automobile industry and the tobacco industry being forced to put in regulations for safety, seatbelt regulations, you know, anti-smoking regulations. And when that happened, Lewis C. Powell wrote this memo where they encourage every conservative, especially conservatives that were working in corporations, to invest at least 10% of the company's profits into politics, specifically into reforming the courts in the United States of America. That project, 50 years later, is why we have a conservative Supreme Court that was able to not only overturn Roe v. Wade, but also dismantle affirmative action in this country, also come after the Fearless Fund. That's why it was possible. So we, in rooms like this, have to be thinking about what feels impossible today, that if we seeded it 50 years or 100 years from now, could actually manifest something that's more transformative for our freedom than anything that we've seen before. That's got to be the solution and response to Project 2025.
I want to talk, we're talking a little bit about health and wellness here, so talk about how the attacks on reproductive rights violate black women specifically. Sure.
So I think for me, it's personal for me. I've had 3 miscarriages since I had my son. And I think about, if you all were there last night watching the young sisters tell their stories, a wife who just wanted to have her baby and although the child passed away, was unable to get the kind of care needed. And what I realized, I'm also a preacher. I want to just full disclosure.
We can tell.
What has happened is this has become a moral majority movement that has thwarted theology. I'll tell you what I mean. There has been an actual intentional investment in language around reproductive justice that has nothing to do with justice. Has everything to do with constitutional overreach. And what we have done, even in the church, is have issued our people to focus on one thing and distract them from the entire process, which is what reproductive rights is really all about. And so I believe life begins at conception because I had one child, and I'm grateful for that. But I have no right to enforce my belief or my anything onto anyone else's decisions. And the examples that we're seeing now, as someone who was in a hospital room, walked over by my doctor when I was bleeding on a table, who did not know, in the middle of COVID, and losing this child with no help. And a black woman was the doctor that was able to come and help me.
Yep.
So when I talk about reproductive rights, for me, I'm thinking about the women that have lost children and have had no help. And I've got 3 degrees, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So for black women, our experiences are so different when it comes to this issue because we're taught by the church, we're taught by the government, we're taught by all these systems that tell us what we can and cannot do. It's between me, my God, and my partner if I let him be a part of that decision. And what we have to do now is begin to help people understand that this is bigger than one issue. But what happened, and they are counting on, particularly faith folks, they're counting on us to stick to what one preacher told you when he won't even let me in the pulpit. So I don't even know why we're talking to him.
You better say that. You better say that.
So and I want us to look at this very carefully. Reproductive justice is not just about abortion. It is about health care and decisions and constitutional freedoms that belong to me, myself, and I.
Yes.
It's personal, y'all. It's painful too. But the same God that I love and serve has kept me even through that. And now I'm able to tell people the truth. And the truth is that didn't change my salvation because I lost that child and had to get a DNC. That didn't change it for me. And there's some sisters out there that are now not getting the help they need.
Yeah.
Because this country is full of men that have no clue what it means. But yet they can make a decision. Brothers, I love you, but you have not birthed what we have birthed. And imagine the pain. Imagine the pain of what that feels like. But yet legislation can override competence in this space.
That's right.
I feel bad skipping over you, President Saunders, but we have someone, we got some voices. So I'm gonna come back in just a moment.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go down to the end here, President Johnson. Talk to us about how we can mobilize. How are we able to protect these rights? This is your thing. Talk to us.
Whew. First of all, Sister Siobhan.
Ready?
What?
You're going to answer that?
I am.
I'd like to get a little piece of that too.
Good.
I am, because I want to take a moment and honor the testimony that Sister Siobhan just gave us. I want to honor that testimony because testimony and storytelling, testimony is storytelling. Yeah. Yes. It is about demonstrating who we are when we have been told consistently over and over again to deny ourselves, to shrink ourselves, to show up differently, to mainstream ourselves in ways that we know is not authentic to who we are. And you came in here and you shared a deep and personal story. You shared a story that defied the stigma around having an abortion that was necessary and medically necessary for you. You shared a story that was literally a radical act of defiance. A radical act of defiance because we have been told not to have these conversations, and not to have these conversations in these rooms, in church rooms, in board rooms, whatever rooms we are in, unless maybe we are just having a conversation with our close girlfriends.
It's the truth.
And we sat here and we listened to that story. We bore witness to that story. And bearing witness to these stories is a radical act of grace. And in between the defiance and in between the grace, that is when the Spirit is at work. So you gave us that Spirit. And that is what we do every single day as organizers. That is what we do every single day as movement leaders. That is what we do every day as we transform the very institutions that we are in. NAACP is one of the most important legacy institutions in our community. But it is not lost on me that I am sitting in a seat of an organization that's over 100 and something years old, and I am the only second Black woman to lead it.
Thank you.
That Kelly Robinson is the first Black woman to lead the Human Rights Campaign. And that Lee Saunders has been leading, asked me for how long, I don't know what I asked, for a long time. I just want to honor your leadership. But that we didn't get into these positions by accident, right? Thank you. We actually got into these positions in this moment where we are. All of the leaders of the sexual and reproductive health, I think most of the leaders of the sexual and reproductive health organizations and justice right now, save one, are all women of color and maybe all Black women except for one. That is a huge deal that we have taken over this movement in this moment to be in formation. Yes. We are in formation. Yeah. And so it is the stories that we will be telling from our lived experience. It is the organizing that we will be doing because we are able to connect to the growing transformative power, the generational shift in power that Kelly talked about. It is our ability to go and advocate for those seats at the table that Brother Sanders talks about in terms of transforming our lives, our economies, in ways that work for us because we have centered our lives and our experiences. That's the only way we can build policy that's going to transform us.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me kind of change the direction of the discussion. We know that we're under attack. And they're trying to take our power away from us, more than our power. They want to take our voices away from us. And what we believe in, they want to take that away from us as well. And we can't let that happen. So the question in my mind is this, and you can go back to Project 2025, and you can look and read, and it's on paper in black and white, what they are proposing to do, and they are very serious about it. So here's the question, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Do we sit back and act like it's not real? Or do we make our voices heard and do we organize like never before to fight back?
Absolutely.
Now, I've got to tell you this. A lot of folks don't like to get involved in politics. They think it's dirty. It is dirty. It can be dirty. Politics is a contact sport. But we've got to play in that sport in order to move an agenda that benefits working families, that benefits all of us, and benefits the issues that we all care about. And how do we do that? We do it through organizations like AFSCME, where we've got 1.4 million members, the NAACP, NAN, all of our organizations working together to understand that if we are silent, or if we don't step up to the challenge, we will lose.
That's right.
And that's what this is all about.
That's right.
And we need messengers in our community. We need people to say, this is an issue, this is an attack on us, this is an attack on our freedoms, and we're going to speak out about it. We will not be silent. You've got the churches, you've got union members, but we need other messengers out there that will carry that message to other folks. We need to have that connection where we're fighting for the same thing. And if we do that, we can win.
Yes.
Yes.
If we do that, we can win. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story. It's a part of our history within AFSCME. In 1968, there were 1,600 sanitation workers, African Americans, in Memphis, Tennessee. And they were sick and tired of being sick and tired, being mistreated by the boss. 2 sanitation workers were crushed in the back of a sanitation truck because they had been demanding safety and health equipment and they didn't get it from the city. Working for poverty wages, no benefits. And they had enough. And we should have enough. We should fight back like they fought back. They went on strike in 1968 in the Deep South in Memphis, Tennessee. And they said enough was enough. And you know what they also said? I am a man.
Yes.
Those were the signs and the placards that they carried. And we had allies and friends in the religious community. I just attended a funeral of a great man who was walking with us in Memphis, Tennessee, Reverend Jim Lawson, who passed away in Los Angeles about 3 weeks ago. And I spoke at his funeral because if it wasn't for men like that, those sanitation workers would have lost that strike. Not only for the union standing up, but the religious community standing up. And our allies in that community standing up. Dr. Martin Luther King came to Memphis because he believed in that struggle. He believed in their fight, and he ultimately gave his life for that.
Yes, he did.
We can't forget that. There has been sacrifice. People have died for the freedoms that we currently enjoy. We just can't let anybody take it away.
Yep.
We can't do that. The end of the story is this. Those sanitation workers stuck together. And they won that strike. They won that strike because why? They stuck together and they had a community around them. This is basic stuff as far as I'm concerned. We can win this battle if we stick together and we have community around us, supporting us, being messengers, talking about the issues that confront us. And if we do that, and if we understand that after Project 2025, there'll be another project that they come up with. We're going to have to be prepared constantly every single day.
That's right.
And that's what all of us must do every single day, be prepared and fight back.
That's right. Amen. Don't get ready. Don't get ready. Stay ready.
I'm like, boom. Amen.
That was powerful. Would you guys help me thank our panelists today? This time I'll hand it back over to our team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Please welcome to the stage Phaedra Jackson, Vice President, Unit Advocacy and Effectiveness, NAACP.
All right, all right, all right. Let's give it up again for our panel. All right, so again, my name is Phaedra Jackson. I oversee a lot of the research and messaging that we do at the NAACP, And I have a brief amount of time to come before you, but we wanted to give you a teaser of what we're seeing and learning from our research around talking to Black voters. Because everything we just talked about, you have to have a message to actually get voters to participate in democracy, right? And the only way you derive that message is to talk to Black voters and to understand how they are experiencing life and how they are articulating their policy solutions to make sure that they are feeling that process in the democratic process. And so we have conducted some research over the course of the last few months talking to Black voters. If we can go to the next slide, we'll dig into some key findings. Again, these are going to be really top lines so that we can get some points out here, but the NAACP will be rolling out a full research briefing so folks who are organizing Black voters have talking points, have messaging, have frames and research to be able to talk to our voters and make sure that they're turning out. So our key findings, Black Americans crave unity within their community. That goes without saying, but I think it's really important to lift up. Our community is looking for a unifying force. We see it when we're reacting to things like policing, but we need a unity in our community to move forward. Folks are looking for a unified message. Folks are looking for a way to fight back collectively. Unity is the path to equality and justice for Black Americans. People we talk to really talk about how the stereotypes and prejudice really set us up for failure sometimes, but when we come together and we act in unity, when we act in collective power, we're able to overcome that. And so when we think about this election cycle, we've really got to leverage that power to see a policy solution to make sure that we're overcoming those barriers. For point 3, Black Americans vote in order to protect and advance the community. You've heard it all this morning, right? We are under attack on every front. Our children are under attack. Their education is under attack. Our rights are under attack. And so the best way to protect our community is to come together and leverage our vote to make sure we're electing folks who are champions and who are creating policy that protects all of our rights, right? We've got to make sure that we're seeing a reflection of our community and the principles that we espouse in the policies and the folks that we're electing. And so we need to make sure when we message to Black voters that they're seeing that reflected back. And as we move to the next slide, we'll talk about the final 2 key findings. Next slide. So there is deep disillusionment with politicians and the political process. We are here talking about this, so I think it's interesting to have this conversation where there have been politicians on this stage in the political process, but I think it's also important for us to understand that we have to meet voters where they are, and for many, the sense of the term democracy has fallen short for them, right? For our community, the concept of democracy has not really been fulfilled, and so when we talk to voters, we have to acknowledge where they are to then get them to move forward in participating in the voting process. And we want to make sure that we actually can point to ways in which your act of voting has gotten you the ability to do things. You think about voting to make sure you get the right to vote. You think about following through on campaign promises and accountability. And finally, when you take all these things together, you start to see a thread and a theme and buckets of ways to talk to voters. There are 4 message frames that are really promising as we start to talk to voters and understand where they're moving. The first is honoring the work of ancestors. Throughout this entire convention, we've heard folks lay tribute to our ancestors who paved the way for us to even be in these rooms and walk these halls, and that resonates with voters. So understanding that our ancestors made it so that we could be here today, and we have to honor that, and part of that is making sure that we're voting. This concept of collective action, when we fight, we win. We want to make sure that we are lifting up the collective power that we have, but also the fight back. We don't just lay down and give up our rights. We fight back to make sure we overcome. Our rights under attack. Project 2025, we've all said it, it is a gift in that it rang the alarm bell and it woke folks up to say we have to not let this become reality. We're already seeing it in several states, but we can stop it from becoming a national mandate, and we have to vote to do so. And then finally, holding our elected leaders accountable. Our community is tired of electeds coming in and making false promises and telling us they want their votes and then not coming through. And so the conversation, yes, accountability. The conversation is around making sure that, okay, you came to my community, you said you were gonna fix all the things. Number one, I know that's not true because you can't do it all at once. Number two, we're gonna make sure that this is the beginning. When you vote, that is the beginning. The follow through is making sure that those policies are passed. And if you don't do it, you don't get to come back to work. All right, so then in closing, I have about 1 minute left. I'm gonna move into our last slide, which is gonna talk about what are we watching? What are we looking for when talking to Black voters? Next slide, please. So there are three things we're watching right now. We are watching what the top issues are for Black voters. It's easy to say economic issues, but there's a lot more underneath that, right? Black voters are experiencing really the heavy weight of the inflation and the cost of living. And when I say the cost of goods and services, right? Like milk is too expensive, rent and housing is too expensive, and voters are struggling. And so when we start to talk to voters about fighting back and getting folks elected, these are the issues that are on top of their mind. They're also concerned about crime and public safety. Gun violence is top of mind for many Black voters, whether it's mass shootings or it's interpersonal gun violence in their communities. It is something that we are watching and Black voters are looking for solutions to. One thing that we can say is Black men and younger Black men are really driving these results. So we see that Black men, especially on the economic piece, are really looking for solutions, entrepreneurial opportunities in their community to be able to be the leaders of their household and to determine their own futures. Number two, young Black men lag behind among Black voters in their perception of vote and their power or motivation. Voter motivation is a key indicator of your likelihood to vote. And I raise this point not to vilify our Black men, because that is not the place at all. I believe that data and research points us to where we need to dig deeper. So what are we missing? What are we not delivering for Black men to actually to see their vote as powerful and to motivate them to vote? This is a call to action to all of us to dig deeper, to find that, and to make sure we have those policy solutions and we're lifting up the ones that we've already had. And then finally, vote messaging emphasizing rights being under attack has the most significant chance to motivate undecided voters and Black men. So again, a lot of this talk has been grounded in Project 2025. The NAACP has a whole set of resources around our 2025. Feel free to use that information to motivate voters. It is a great gift. It is a tool that we can use. And I look forward to working with you and sharing more information about our research. Thank you.
And now coming to the stage to deliver our closing and call to action, our fearless leader, Derrick Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP.
Good evening. Let's give the staff a hand for putting together this. In closing, there is a reason why we wanted to pull our delegates together. And unfortunately, we could not get the information out to everybody, just the logistics with the DNC. The significance of the National Convention and the relationship with the NAACP is important for us to understand as we convene the next few days. In 1963, there were a group of activists who went to the March on Washington. And they left the March on Washington frustrated, upset, because they realized that regardless of that historic gathering, they were going to go back to the South to the same hell they left. And nothing had changed. And so that group, they began to put together a plan, a strategy to have outcomes that was necessary to move public policy. The march and demonstration was great in terms of performative, but it didn't move anything the way individuals was going to go back home and experience the same hell they left. And that group consisted of several individuals, several organizational affiliations, but all of them had the same thing in mind: how to hold the guarantees in the Constitution to be the reality of the lived experience for African Americans in a Jim Crow South. And they put forth a strategy, a plan that was outcome-driven, not output-driven. Output-driven, I went to the meeting. We had a march. We made a lot of noise, but what was the outcome? And that group of individuals consisted of Bob Moses, who was recruited by Ella Baker, who organized individuals, and Ella Baker, who was with the NAACP and got frustrated because the level of male chauvinism and the treatment of women leadership during that period of time. Ella Baker, who also recognized that the strategies that Roy Wilkins was putting forth and Thurgood Marshall was not broad enough, because Thurgood felt that everything should happen in accord, and Roy Wilkins wanted it in a nice, neat box that he could control, and Ella Baker believed that movements could not be waged only in the court, because we had just one Brown versus Board of Education, and the box that Roy Wilkins wanted to put us in was insufficient to address the problem. And so Ella Baker, once she convened some young people and gave them space to be creative within the guardrails of not being foolish. But she also realized there were a group of men and women in Mississippi, most of whom were World War II veterans, who was courageous and willing to challenge the status quo. Even though Roy Wilkins wanted to try to put them into a box, they dared him to try, because he couldn't. And she assigned those students to those World War II veterans and a few courageous women who were the leaders of their local communities. And they organized a strategy. And one of the key components of that strategy was to challenge the rules of the National Democratic Party, because the state parties in the former Confederate states created a mechanism that would not allow African Americans to participate. So even if they had their rights to vote, they were locked out, because all the decisions were made during the primary of the Democratic political party. And so they created a strategy to look at the national rules, go back home, organize precinct by precinct, county by county, following all the rules. So when they come back around to the next year, they can go to New Jersey to challenge whether or not the delegation that followed all the rules should be seated versus the delegation that violated all the rules, to try to maintain a segregated state party delegation. 1964, outcome-driven, not output-driven. Now, we also recognize that political parties are vehicle for voice or political agendas. They don't establish the agenda. They're the vehicle by which individual groups align behind to put forward. And so if anybody talk about the political party A or B, political parties are made up of peoples and agendas, and at the exact same time this group was doing this to force the Democratic Party to do something, another person and a group of individuals, some of whom served on our national boards because they were forced to, they had organized under the Republican Party. And the lead in that was a gentleman who integrated Major League Baseball, who served on our board, by the name of Jackie Robinson. And Jackie Robinson, as a Republican, began to hear and see how the Republican Party began to restructure their agenda to exclude black people. And he began to listen to Nixon. And early on, Jackie Robinson said that we have to prevent Nixon from becoming president at all costs, because if he does, he will reverse the progress the black community has made to that point. Political parties are vehicles for agendas. And so Jackie Robinson, as a Republican, began to organize. Other Republicans says, listen, this George Wallace thing is picking up traction, and behind him is Richard Nixon. Black Republicanism has always been a part of what we have done in this mix, and we need to do all things. That for any of us who align under that banner, to say you are a Lincoln Republican is saying that you subscribe to white supremacy, because Lincoln said if he can save the Union without freeing a single slave, he would do it. It was Frederick Douglass, who was a Republican, who would hold Lincoln accountable in advancing the interests of Africans who were now newly citizens, Americans, to ensure that our agenda would be pushed. It was Frederick Douglass that called to question, after we had taken up arms to defend the Union, to keep people together and defeat the Confederacy, that continued to push for public policies and hold Lincoln accountable. Political parties is nothing but vehicles for agendas. And so Jackie Robinson continued in that tradition. On the Republican side, you have what we call grifters. And grifters are individuals who use their racial identity to align under that political party banner for their own individual benefit. And so you have Republicans who advocate in the interests of the communities they come from to make sure our agenda is intact, and you have those who leverage their identity for the purpose of self-benefit. So an author by the name of Clay Kane, who wrote a book called The Grift, and he gives an analysis between two individuals, Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. And based on this author, Colin Powell never betrayed the interests of the black community. In fact, he sought to advance it, where Condoleezza Rice benefit from the programs that people like Colin Powell fought for, including affirmative action, but when she got in position, she denounced it because she had benefited from it, she didn't want nobody else to get a benefit from it. So as we talk about the Democratic Party while we are here, that challenge went forward. And when they showed up, it went to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee said, okay, we got to hear this challenge because this delegation followed all the rules and this one did not. Because the national rules say you could not have a segregated delegation and you could not adopt policies to segregate. But the practice had been for the southern states, they would segregate and not allow African Americans to participate, resulted in many African Americans in the South organizing Republican clubs. So when that challenge went forward, the leaders of the organizations selected Aaron Henry, who was the state president for the NAACP, and Fannie Lou Hamer to represent the position of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And because of the powerful testimony of Fannie Lou Hamer, it pushed the president to cut all nationally televised viewing of her speech so he can do an announcement, because it was so compelling that he was concerned that the opposition in a global Cold War would use it as propaganda as they tried to acquire assets on the continent of Africa. But later that evening, they aired the entire testimony. And what Fannie Lou Hamer did in her testimony was call to question the treatment of African Americans in states like Mississippi. Because of that testimony, and Aaron Henry's testimony just outlining how they followed the rules, the next convention in 1968 forced every Democratic state organization to integrate. And so for the first time, we could fully participate. And at the exact same time, when we turned the corner from 68 to 72, the Southern state Republican parties aggressively kicked black people out of the party. So those two things happen at the same time because these are the vehicles for public policy and voice. You fast forward, what we witnessed in '84 with Jesse Jackson's first run, 20 years later, he ran. Although he got more votes than many, it was not a proportion. And so, after the '84 convention, there was a fight to refine the rules to create proportional voting, that if you lose a state, the whole state will go to you, but the rules changed that you only would get the proportion by congressional district as opposed to the whole state, proportional representation. You come to '88, Jesse Jackson did exceptionally well because proportionality and the Voting Rights Act had been fought for over 25 years by this time, and so you begin to see more African Americans participating in this convention and being elected to office as a result of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Because of all of this, we get Barack Obama. Barack Obama would have never been elected as president but for the hard work in local communities like Itta Bena and Macomb and all those other areas by individuals who was courageous enough not to be contained in the box, to do something different, understanding that intergenerational organizing is the most effective way. We can't afford to have an us versus us contest, young versus old, male versus female. That is foolishness. Because when you talk about impacting the formation of public policy to improve the quality of life, not only for African Americans, because every advancement we've made impacts everybody. It lowers the barrier of access and opportunity. It holds the Constitution more consistent with the promise that equal protection under the law should be afforded to all citizens. And so that's 2008. Well, you turn the corner to 2024, and what we have witnessed over the last few weeks, when it was a question around whether or not the sitting president should step down, there were those who were seeking to step over the vice president because they wanted an open convention. Guess what? You couldn't do that because the rules had been built on the back of Fannie Lou Hamer and Aaron Henry and so many others to create the space for us to be here today. And so when it was time to move forward, we had individuals like Mignon Moore and Donna Brazile and so many others who learned the rules in '84 and '85 based on the lessons from 1964. So you couldn't skip over the vice president, and Thursday she will be the nominee for this political party. That did not happen because we were observers or bystanders. All of that happened because of the active engagement of NAACP units and other individuals and organizations to recognize that our power is in our collective unity to ensure that we are treated with dignity, respect, and that we are entitled to all of the bounties of this country because not only have we earned it, we built it. And so we wanted to pull this conversation together so you can hear some of the policy issues, some of the concerns, but for me, so we can recognize the moral, political authority that we speak from and why we are here and why we must always engage. And there may be a time where there's another transition and we have to pick another vehicle for our voice to ensure the public policy reflect our needs and interests. But this isn't the time when people start talking about a third-party candidate. In a two-party systems, there is no third-party option unless you are seeking to undermine one of the two options. And because somebody owed taxes and they're looking at this as a way to pay off their $500,000 tax bill, or because somebody may have a worm in their brain and they're not in their right mind, we cannot afford to dilute the strength that we build. And we must maintain the momentum that was created because we're standing on a platform that other folks sacrificed, bled, and died to ensure that we have firm footing. So thank all of you who are here, who are wearing these dual hats as delegates to this convention, but as active members of the NAACP. And we tell people, yes, we are nonpartisan, but we are political as hell. And that won't change. We're sober enough to understand you cannot be a bystander and think something's going to happen for us. We have to be an active participants so we can ensure that the social contract we call the Constitution applies to every individual. Thank you all for all that you have done. Please, we need you to join us. Take out your cell phones. Take out your cell phones. Open your text message and text the number 20707 and type in the word volunteer. Why is this important? We are almost at halfway in recruiting 300,000 volunteers so that we can text, call, knock on doors, send letters to infrequent voters that we must get out in November. And the beautiful thing about the program and who we are, because we have a collective shared history, we don't have to tell people how to vote. We just got to get them to the polls. Text the number 20707 to the word volunteer. Why? Because we don't need celebrities to tell our folks what to do. It's helpful. We don't need party machines to tell our folks what to do. It can be helpful. We need neighbors talking to neighbors. We need people who are familiar with the precinct, the county, the communities where infrequent voters are from. Some of those infrequent voters sleep in your houses, your husband, your wives, your children. 2008 was a high watermark for us. 2012 was great. We've seen a substantial drop-off in 16. 2020, we ramped back up. It's called relational organizing. People who are familiar with who you are, who live in your community, hearing from you say, we got to get you out to the polls. In 92, 95% of the time, they're going to do what's right, and we got to tell them. Just get them there. We are hyper-political. We've been paying attention to this for 4 years. Most Americans, black or white, they don't start paying attention to the election until after Labor Day. And they're waiting for you to give them direction or approval to do what we need them to do. Thank you all very much. I see a hand, Reverend Anthony in the back. Clarence Thomas is a grifter. Clarence Thomas have lived off the back of the many people who sacrificed and create an opportunity for him to even be on the Supreme Court, and every chance he get, he turned his back on that. He used his racial identity to hate his race. That's grifting off the legacy and the sacrifice of so many people, both black and white. That's a softball. He and I had that conversation. I don't know why the preacher be doing that. She just want me, he gonna make me cuss in a minute. Stop, man, stop. Stop. Any other questions before we break up? But I really want to thank all of you for coming here to have this conversation. I see one in the back. I don't know. I hope it wasn't recorded. I probably was cussing, so there ain't no video. You recording it. I'm just told it will be on YouTube after this event. All right? Any other questions? Yes. Great question, and hello to the baby. We do it all the time. What you all do as branch leaders when you submit the resolutions and we adopt them during the convention, that's an agenda. That's setting the policy priorities that the members across the country feel are important, which is a priority. That is our agenda. And so we do it all the time. It doesn't feel like it's in the political space, but you actually identify what you think is important for us as an organization to prioritize. This past year, I think we have more resolutions than we've had in a number of years, and you spend probably north of 8 hours on the resolutions floor adopting and debating our agenda. Well, I'm just doing my black job. That's all I'm doing. I'm just doing my black job. I do want to recognize one of my partners. Damien Hewitt is the president and CEO of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. They are partnered. A lot of the lawsuits that we filed, we're about to file one in Georgia, I think, on what they just did. They're the lead counsel on much of that. So thank you, long-term friend. And if someone from New Orleans, go ahead. Thank you all very much. Enjoyed tonight. I think both Michelle and Barack Obama will be speaking. But when you hear them speak, think about Aaron Henry and Fannie Lou Hamer. But for them, they would not be on that stage. Peace and power.